All right, so now is where we start filling in the function or definition for each of these organelles. We need to list whether they are located in a plant or animal cell or both, and then we need to start coloring. So we're going to go ahead and start with the cell wall. Now, as you can see, I colored in the cell wall blue right here, and I only colored it on the plant cell. That's because the cell wall is only located on plant cells, not in animal cells. So make sure you include that. The cell wall provides shape, support, and protection to the cell. It's this rigid structure that encapsulates the whole thing. It's sort of like putting a phone case on a cell. So the cell itself is kind of squishy, but we put the cell wall on it and it provides some protection. So you are going to go ahead and color this in on your plant cell, add the definition, and list that it is only included in plant cells. And you're going to do all that information for each other organelle that we do. Next, we have the cell membrane. So this is a little bit different than the cell wall because the cell membrane is not rigid. It is soft and flexible. It does help hold things together, but the biggest job that it has is regulating materials entering and exiting the cell. So this is super important. We don't want bad things to come in the cell, and we want to keep the good things in the cell. So it decides what comes in and what leaves, and it also does provide some protection and support holding everything together. You can see that I colored in the cell membrane red here, and both animal cells and plant cells have a cell membrane. So make sure you include that in both. Next, we're going to talk about the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm, I colored in yellow here, and you see that it is in both plant and animal cells. And this is just the gel-like or the jelly-like filling that fills all the extra space in the cell. So instead of all the empty space just being air, it is filled with cytoplasm. This helps maintain the shape of the cell and helps keep all the other organelles in place where they need to be, so we don't just have empty space. So again, this is in both plant and animal cells here, and I colored it in yellow. Next, we have the nucleus. This one I colored in green. We already talked about the nucleus a little bit in the first video, but this is kind of the control center of this cell. This is because the nucleus contains all of the cell's DNA, which is the instructions for everything the cell does. So it's sort of like the brain of the cell is the nucleus. And so it's the little ball that we see here in both the plant cell and the animal cell. Next, we have the nuclear envelope. This surrounds the nucleus and it controls what enters and exits the nucleus. So because the nucleus contains all the DNA, it's really important. So we need that second layer of protection. So it's sort of like another membrane here that just encapsulates the nucleus and provides that extra level of protection that only absolutely necessary things can enter or exit the nucleus. And you can see that it is in both plant and animal cells surrounding the nucleus, and I colored it in purple here. Now we have vacuoles, and these are a little bit different between plant and animal cells. So vacuoles are located in both plant and animal cells, but they look very different depending on what cell they're in. So the vacuoles store water, salts, proteins, carbohydrates, and in a plant cell, they have a big central vacuole, and this gets filled with water, and it helps provide rigidity to the cell to keep everything in place, helps provide structure and storage for these necessary things. If you look over here in the animal cell, we do have a couple tiny ones, but it's very different and they're a lot smaller, so they don't have this large central vacuole. So you could say both, but you kind of need to know that if you see a large central vacuole, that is a plant cell. So typically we just think that If it's a central vacuole, that's only in plants, but animal cells do have a couple tiny ones here. Now we have lysosomes. I included these in orange, and these are only found in the animal cell here, and I colored them in right here. So they're these little circle things, and they're actually filled with enzymes that we talked about the last few classes. And these enzymes break down the lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, waste, any old structures. They break everything down that is not needed anymore. So these are only found in animal cells. Now we have the cytoskeleton. I did the cytoskeleton in brown here, and you can see it is in animal cells and also in plant cells over here. It's just harder to see in the plant cells. The cytoskeleton is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's sort of like the skeleton of the cell. It provides structure. So it's a network of proteins, and it helps give cells their shape and helps gives them some internal organization, so all their organelles aren't just moving around wherever they want to be. They can also help with movement, so like cilia and flagella that will help the cell move around. Next, we have ribosomes. I did this in this bright green here, so it's a little bit different than the nucleus, and it's all these little circle dots right here in both the plant and the animal cells. Now, the ribosomes are important because they make proteins by stringing together amino acids, which we will talk more about later. And some of them are attached to the ER. This stands for endoplasmic reticulum. And some of them are just free in the cell. So you can see them over here. They're just kind of free in the cell. And right here, they're attached to the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. So it's all these little tiny dots in both plant and animal cells. Next, we get to the endoplasmic reticulum, which I colored in pink. Now, this is this like folded network of membranes here that assembles lipids in the smooth ER and proteins in the rough ER. Now, the difference between smooth and rough is just the presence of these ribosomes that we just finished talking about. So the smooth ER is called smooth because it doesn't have those ribosomes attached to it, whereas the rough ER is rough because it's got all these ribosomes attached to it right here. So that is the difference. In this class, mostly we'll just be talking about the ER, or the endoplasmic reticulum in general, and we won't really have to differentiate between smooth and rough, but it helps assemble lipids and proteins, and found in both plant and animal cells. Now we have the Golgi apparatus. I did this one in gray because we're starting to run out of colors here. The Golgi apparatus modifies, sorts, and packages proteins and lipids from the ER for storage or transport out of the cell. So it gets everything packaged and ready to go wherever it needs to be, sort of like the packaging and shipping center of the cell, like a UPS for the cell. And so you can see I did it right here. It's these little folded membranes in both plant and animal cells. Now we have the ever popular mitochondria. So mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So this is where the cells get their energy, and I did the mitochondria in black with purple in the middle because they kind of have these folds on the inside. So you can see they're both in plant cells and animal cells. Now they convert energy from food into energy that the cell can use. So this is where the cell is converting and creating its energy. So these are super important for the cell to get energy. If they don't have mitochondria, they're not going to have the energy they need to perform all their important functions. So mitochondria, power plant of the cell in both plant and animal cells. Now we have centrioles. We will talk about these more in the future and actually next semester, but these are only located in animal cells and they're actually not pictured, so you don't need to color in anything for the centrioles. What they do is they organize cell division. So when an animal cell is dividing, they will come out and they will help organize and help with that process. So you don't need to worry about it for this coloring, but you do need to include the definition and the fact that it is only in animal cells on the front side of your worksheet. Now we have chloroplasts, and again we are running out of colors, so I did this in 3 different colors here. We have our dark green, light green, and the little folds in the middle are in yellow. Chloroplasts are only in plant cells because this is what they use to convert energy from the sun to energy that the cell can use. Obviously, we don't do photosynthesis, so we don't have chloroplasts. It is just in plant cells here. So they help capture energy from the sun and convert it into energy that the cell can use. Now, these chloroplasts are green because they contain chlorophyll, which is a type of green pigment. And that is our last organelle that we're going to go over today. So make sure you have all of them colored in. Make sure if you used any colors that differentiate from what I used on my slide, you include that in your key specifically. I'm going to show it right here again. So make sure you have both the animal and the plant cell filled in. Your key should be finished so I know what color matches to what. And this should be all filled out with the function definition and listing both plant, animal, or both for each of them. And then go ahead and turn that in. Thank you.